And we're live. We're waiting for the clap. I shoulder some of the responsibility for that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to SpeakuP Monday here at Tropical Nomad. Every Monday, 6 p.m., but 6:25 we go live. So tonight, as you know, is episode number 429, and we have a wonderful. I say this every week, but I really mean it. Every week we have a wonderful guest. So, Dr. Melanie Rieback, welcome to SpeakuP Monday, my dear.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So now look, tonight, for those of you wondering, as you can see, Post Growth Entrepreneurship. And I'm going to read over here so I don't miss anything because I think it's too important. So understand this. So a lot of us understand that the free market mechanism, the laissez-faire economy was set out to be a certain way from our man Adam Smith back in the day. And obviously we know the world has gone in different directions. And when it comes to entrepreneurism, perhaps capitalism, perhaps, but entrepreneurism, you know, the world has come to a certain place. So what tonight is really about is, now what do you refer to as new generation, next generation, social
Enterprise.
So next generation social enterprise. So what is beyond our current system without dismantling that system or breaking it apart, but what can we do next? And that's what tonight is really going to be about, the large part of it anyway. Now I'm going to read from my note here because there's too many important things to miss out. So as we mentioned, Dr. Melanie Rieback, CEO and co-founder of Radically Open Security, the world's first non-for-profit computer security company, and the Post Growth Startup Incubator non-profit ventures that you can see over here, a little logo for you. So Dr. Melanie Rieback, CEO, I've done that part, a former assistant of computer science at the Free Amsterdam University. Dr. Rieback has been recognized as the most innovative IT leader of the Netherlands by CIO Women's Magazine, Tim Awards 2017, and one of the 9 most innovative women in the European Union. And this was the EU Women Innovators Prize in 2019. So tonight is about learning about new innovative approaches to entrepreneurship that prioritize social and environmental impact over profit. So that's what we're looking forward to tonight. And just before we start, a quick intro to myself. Welcome, Benjamin, and the show. So as you know, SpeakuP Monday is about entrepreneurship and social impact. Now, I'm also the founder of RIB and Associates, which is a growth strategist or a gateway to Indonesia. Now, there's 3 things which are important that I should share with you. So number 1 is, it's about feasibility. So many companies come to Indonesia on the whim of a written report. The difference in what we do is that we say, come and meet the people, meet the stakeholders in whichever industry you are in, and hear from the horse's mouth the latest tactics, how to be a participant, not a spectator. So where do you get your advice from? Those in the market today who are succeeding in that market, who are disrupting that market, or those who did it 5 or 10 years ago? You need to go to the horse's mouth today. So that's one thing that we do. Number 2 is what strategy will allow you to have that market penetration, that market entry, that market impact. So we have the connections through SpeakuP Monday, 400 or so episodes, to the leaders in about 10 different industries. So what we're able to then do uniquely is to plug you into your network. If your network isn't there, we will create it for you. So that second part is really important. And the third and final part, with a wonderful platform like this, it's organic, over 1 million views, over 400 plus episodes. So SpeakuP Monday is wonderful because we have a great audience here tonight. The people that come are self-selected. When you see a topic or a title like this one, who shows up? The people who are interested in this topic, no one else. So now you have an opportunity to network with your peers. And this is where partnerships are formed, where collaborations are formed. And this is where the rubber really hits the road and you have a soft, warm landing. So look, let's get on with tonight's show. We have a few takeaways that we're going to explore, which I'll just map out for you now. So one of them is valuable insights into sustainable, non-extractive business and investment models. Another is the practical strategies for building resilient, community-focused enterprises. And the third one is lessons, which is what we all want to know, lessons from Europe and potential takeaways from Europe for us. Now, so let's start the show. I think, again, one of the 9 most innovative women in the European Union. My first question is that how did that come about? And what were the verticals to assess that?
Well, I mean, I don't know the exact specifics of how the jury made their selection, but
A little bit closer.
Sorry?
A little bit close to your mouth.
Oh, sorry. But it was quite interesting because I went into the group the room with the jury, and I basically told them I do not-for-profit business. And of course the immediate response is what? But the thing is, we understand that business can be a solution. But, of course, also business sometimes is the problem. But we need to think very consciously about exactly how we are using our business. What I like to say sometimes is that business is the most effective form of activism. Yeah. And when we think about activism, we tend to think about nonprofit organizations like NGOs, like Greenpeace or Extinction Rebellion or these kinds of things. But first of all, they don't have a monopoly on being able to make change. And the second thing also is that it's all great with all holding up the pickout signs outside of the corporations. But truthfully, if you really want to drive change, nothing will drive it faster than starting an alternative on the commercial market. Because if you can take a not-for-profit company, which I'll explain in a minute what I mean by that, and you can put it on the commercial market, then at that point they are forced to compete with you for staff and also for customers. And this really drives the dialogue about things like also ethics and what kinds of value you're actually providing and for whom. And, I find it also a much more effective way, really, of being able to make change. But, of course, most people, on the business side just get annoyed at activists, and most people on the activistic side just write off business as, oh, that's evil, and I want absolutely nothing to do with it. But we don't understand that we have to overcome the silos within ourselves to also be able to, become a hybrid of these things. And we have social enterprise, but that also is not necessarily getting us as far as we need to go. Because even with social enterprise, it's really difficult to know these days how much of it is genuine and how much of it is greenwashing, right? How much of it is just marketing. Because, we wind up getting the Tom's Shoes effect, where, of course, you have the story of Blake Makowski and how he thought, okay, I'm going to start this company. You buy one pair of shoes, you give another pair of shoes to Africa, right? It was a great concept. It was a popular company. Everything went well. And then at a certain point, of course, then the company is acquired. And then Blake, becomes a billionaire. And he was like, oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. So, and look, it's good people that are starting these initiatives, but the problem is sometimes that even with social enterprise, when we think that we're just trying to make something better, it's still adopting too many of the old tools of the commercial business ecosystem. And it's the same thing with sustainable finance. There's also a ton of greenwashing, in that as well. I mean, also with ESG, right now in the United States, there's a particularly large backlash also against ESG investing in particular, right? And the thing is, we need to ask ourselves also the question, what is the greenwashing, right? I mean, and of course, once we can understand the nature of it, the next question becomes, well, great, but how do we get rid of it? And I think that this is a topic that has been insufficiently addressed, in part because people feel so uncomfortable talking about it. You know, if you go to a social enterprise conference, no one wants to talk about greenwashing, or an ESG conference, or, you know, nobody wants to talk about this stuff. But we precisely have to talk about it, because if we want to come up with more pure solutions, you know, we need to be able to tackle it head on. And that requires the courage to really look ourselves in the face for what we're building and say, okay, I'm taking responsibility for this. I understand the nature of the problem, and I also understand the steps that I can take to also try and fix it.
You know, this brings up a few things, and, you know, we've just met for the first time, and I really appreciate you flying in from Jakarta, and you're only here for 2 days, so we feel very special to have you. Here's the thing, you know, what we were saying before in our brief conversation, you know, was about, you know, a lot of people believe, you know, maybe government should do this. You know, other people believe that business should do this. And, you know, you're at a wonderful juncture because, you know, not only, you know, are you a doctor, so you have that background, but you're also an entrepreneur. So you're able to navigate and connect the pathways in between. So then when it comes to the system as it stands, you know, where do you think, or what's your understanding of where the system is at right now, and why you feel that a change is necessary, if I've said it correctly?
Yeah. So, look, I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in the government. I don't know, maybe some of you feel differently, but truthfully, you know, it's also something that I feel like I have not much impact on. And I think right now we're also in an era that it's really easy, no matter what side of the political fence you happen to be on, or even if you're on the political fence, it's so easy to feel hopeless. You know, it's also so easy to feel like with voting, like, you know, they're all the same, like my vote makes no difference, right? And, you know, the thing that I like about business is that it's actually really a civil society movement. Anyone can do it. And that's sort of the beauty. Whereas, you know, and there's no politicking with the government. You know, people have to get elected, which then means they need to make promises, which then means they need to keep the promises or not. You know, some of these promises probably aren't even possible to fulfill. But with entrepreneurship, it's so much easier because basically you just start where you're at, look at what you can do, try and get coalitions of people together, you know, who basically can share your vision and want to work with you in financially self-sustaining ways to be able to make it happen. And it's also, you know, in a way, just it's horizontal. Anyone can do it. You know, it's very egalitarian. So it's the kind of thing that even if you don't have a lot of resources, you know, even for people in a developing country, you know, there's many forms of capital. Of course, there's financial capital, but there's also human capital. There's natural resources. There's community, right? So, you know, and also even in developing countries and rural areas, I mean, the power of business just as being able to be a driver for organization, for development, for change, you know, I think anyone can do it. And this is one of these things that really gives me hope in today's world, because in, you know, a time where it's so easy to be angry, it's so easy to feel hopeless, you know, and it's so easy just to want to tear everything down and lash out. I mean, I feel like we need a constructive way of approaching things. We need an optimistic, positive, hopeful story, but then a realistic one. Not just some pie in the sky, oh, everything will be fine, but really rational, scientific, you know, and also just, you know, intuitive about why, you know, we can make things better collectively. And I feel like this has been missing, and I'm also with Post Growth Entrepreneurship really trying to address this lack and also be able to tell people, look, we can use also this kind of social enterprise also in really hopeful ways.
So you mentioned before about next generation social enterprise. So, and we'll drill down to some details afterwards, but next generation social enterprise, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it all starts with really examining entrepreneurship in general, right? So let's say you're a startup founder, and let's say that you want to start a business. Oftentimes what you do is you'll go to a startup incubator, right? And I went through this process myself with Radically Open Security. I went to the Amsterdam Center for Entrepreneurship, which is basically the academic incubator of the Amsterdam University and college system. So the way that it worked was first they flew in someone from Stanford, right? And then I was there, and then on day one of our startup boot camp, we get the PowerPoint slide with the exponential curve on it, right? And then they say, do this. At that point, then they tell me that as an entrepreneur, that my definition of success is to sell the company. And if I want to be particularly successful, then I do this multiple times, right? At that point, they then say, and by the way, you need external capital. So we're also going to introduce you to some venture capitalists, and good luck with getting everything started. Now, mind you, I don't have a business background. I've never, gotten an MBA, and in that sense, I came into this whole experience extremely naive, extremely green, and really just coming in as a techie, as a hacker, a computer hacker. I'm in cybersecurity, so when I say hacker, I mean this in the most literal sense of the word. My job is breaking people's computer systems, and then basically giving them tips for how to fix it again. So I come into this incubator, and half of what they're telling me, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like with the exponential curve, I'm like sitting here thinking, okay, but what if I actually want to grow more organically, right? I mean, do I have a choice in the matter? Things like, exiting your company. I mean, what if you want to create a more social company that's actually meant for the long term, where you're not just looking at a 3 to 5 year time horizon for selling the company? And similar with venture capital, I mean, I realize that, yes, but, if I accept venture capital, I'm not the boss anymore, because a lot of people want the big money, but then they don't realize the strings attached that come with the whole thing. And at first, after I went through this whole incubation experience, I thought, you know what? This makes no sense. But after 4 or 5 years of being a tech CEO, I started realizing that, no, wait a minute, this does make sense, but not for me. And this was sort of where I think my original kind of post-growth entrepreneurship kind of ideas came from. It was just from my sheer, perplexement at the system, at how it was, and then I started picking it apart. Because when you consider business, also finance, and also just capitalism in general, it's a system, right? And we like to complain about the system. We know that problems are systemic, right? But the thing is, we complain about the system, but if you then ask people, what is the system? They can't tell you, right? So, but really, if you give a hacker or a techie, a computer system, what do? The first thing that they do is they're probably going to disassemble it, right? We're going to take it apart. Once we've taken it apart, then, next we're probably going to try and put it together again. Probably wrong, And it's the same thing also, I think, with business and finance, right? Because with that system, the first thing is you need to understand how it works to be able to make change of any kind. You need to ask yourself the question, what are the components? What are the main parts, right? How do these parts fit together? How do they interlock? How do they move, right? And of course, then as a hacker, the most important question we're going to ask, of course, is where do we wedge the ice pick to be able to get it to behave in ways that are different from what it was intended, right? And I sort of took that kind of approach to business and to finance. And I started realizing at a certain point that actually the whole thing was extremely logical. Because if you consider, going back to that first week of incubation, if you consider the exponential curve, well, obviously, exponential growth, you can't keep it up for very long. If you just think about the mathematical nature of exponentiality, at a certain point it's growing so quickly, it just doesn't make any sense anymore. But it doesn't take a huge leap of the imagination to understand that, oh, wait, no, but actually the sole purpose of this exponential curve is to reach the exit within a discrete period of time, preferably 3 to 5 years, right?
so many questions. But the first thing is, what I love about this is episode 429. One of the people is Forbes Business Council that have endorsed us. And part of that is that Forbes isn't only about making money, right? I'm not here for Forbes, by the way, but they're also about social enterprise, which I find, which is making this connection now. Each interview I sit down, I learn so much. And you know, I just wanted to keep on talking. I know I need to ask you some questions, but I feel like the whole interview should be one monologue because I'm just sitting here taking notes. But I love the mindset of what you're saying, a hacker mindset of being able to break something down to its constituent elements, its constituent parts, build it back again, maybe incorrectly, shoving an ice pick in there so you can make it do the things that maybe it's not supposed to do for you, for other people, but you have access. So I understand all of that. So one thing which I want to just draw attention to, and Rasmus, this one is for you, so come back here, Rasmus. So combinatory creativity. Can you explain that to other people? Because I think this is crucial to understanding aspects of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as I understand combinatory creativity, that you're basically just talking to a lot of different people and basically stealing the best ideas, with attribution, of course, and basically just synthesizing them into new solutions, oftentimes in different domains, right? Yeah.
Beautiful. And that's, you know, one aspect of innovation. You know, which I think, again, what you're doing is innovation, right? So that's why I want to bring it up. Okay, next question then. You know, where to from here? So I see Ben over there in the audience, another guy you're going to meet afterwards, very interesting man. So you mentioned before about being an optimist, which I love, right? But also about being a realist in terms of how you can do this. So if you could choose or pick one area and go a little bit deeper, so to put some flesh on the bone, so to speak. So which area would you pick for innovation? And what would you do to put meat on the bones?
All right. So about innovation, I'm going to give you my favorite definition of innovation. And this definition comes from Charles Eisenstein, who's a philosopher and an author. And he wrote a really wonderful book that's called Sacred Economics. I would highly recommend the book. Now, the way that he defines innovation is basically that you are taking basically the non-monetized human relationships and the commons, and you're basically inserting yourself as a platform and then trying to figure out ways in which you're going to monetize it. If you go to a business incubator, this is oftentimes the way that they will teach founders basically to find your business model. Now, here's the thing. We need to consider if this form of innovation is actually getting us where we need to go. Now, what's interesting about Charles Eisenstein is he proposes, well, can we actually take this model and flip it on its head? So what if we were to take things like the monetized economy, and we now insert ourselves as a platform with our business in this, and we then use our business to convert the monetized economy back into non-monetized human relationships and the commons. So he actually calls this degrowth. I'm saying this now as I know this is a term that greatly polarizes. But basically what he's talking about here in this book is decommoditization. Because, you know, and if we consider it also in places like Bali, right? You know, we are coming in oftentimes as Westerners, you know, with our knowledge, with our educations, with our resources, and we're also here to set up our businesses. You know, it could be because we want financial freedom. It could be because we want lifestyle businesses. You know, muses, as Tim Ferriss puts it. But you know, we can also really, I think about sort of the grand why. And if we're in these developing countries, we need to also really consider how is it, because of course there are very deep and strong community relationships, these non-monetized human relationships. They might be regional, they might be tribal, they might be familial, right? And we need to respect this. And of course, also with our influence and our being here, we also have impacts on this ecosystem as well. So I think the real question then becomes with what we're building, what is it actually that we're creating, with our being in places like this? And we have to also be sort of very mindful because, and look, I live in the Netherlands, and saying sort of consciously here in Indonesia, right? I mean, the Netherlands invented capitalism, right? And I mean, also in Amsterdam, at what we call beurs, basically beurs is the stock market, our stock market square. We started the very first stock market, and that stock market was actually meant for raising money to pay for the VOC ships to come and colonize places like Indonesia, right? So we also need to understand, being very careful, that capital is also a form of colonialism. And we also need to be very mindful and also very careful with the ways in which we're deploying it. Because, we can use it to extract value out of the country, but we can also use it to bring value, help create value in the country. But then the question really becomes, how are we wielding it? How are we using it? If we come into a place like Indonesia, and let's say that we want to create a hotel, right? And let's say we bring in maybe a Marriott, like a nice 5-star Marriott. It's the kind of thing that, of course, Western tourists like me are going to love. But let's think about what it's doing for the economy. Probably the Marriott is going to hire some local people. So, I mean, it probably will provide some jobs, maybe for some, hotels, like lobby staff, maybe cleaners, maybe in the kitchen. But the vast majority of the financial value that's created is extracted basically out of the country back to the shareholders of the Marriott hotel chain. And chances are that's probably really large asset managers like BlackRock and Vanguard and things like this. And ultimately the ultimate beneficiaries behind this, which could be institutional investors and us as pensioners ultimately. But the point though is it's different if a local Indonesian then starts their own B&B, for example. Because then when you stay as a foreigner at this B&B, then the money is actually going back and staying in the country, and thus actually really helping also to support the locals and helping with building the communities. And again, it's just a way of thinking, because we want development, and clearly in the Global South, we need development. This is not, up for discussion, but then the question becomes how? How is it that we're doing this development? And, understanding that, we need to find ways to actually keep the capital in the country. So we're not just using it to enrich places like Amsterdam.
Makes sense. We had Dr. Lawrence, feel free to come and join us here, brother, if you want. So we had another academic, as I think someone said earlier on, Ani, Dr. Subowo Musa from SGU, Swiss German University, who's the first international university in Indonesia, and he's the head of the MBA program. He was sitting here maybe 3 weeks ago. Now, what we were talking about in relation to keeping capital in the country was quite interesting. So we broke it down into 3 areas. Socio-economic, socio-political, and socio-cultural. Now, on the socio-economic front, and I won't go through all of them, but on the socio-economic front, it was this simple idea of, if you're able to turn an economy which is a consumer economy into a creator economy, that's a great way to keep the capital in the country. So for everybody else, I didn't get this first, so consumer outside of the raw materials like Australia and so on that Indonesia is blessed with, it in general, this is Dr. Musa talking, not me, it is in general one that consumes. So if I have this glass and I'm drinking water out of it, convergent thinking is saying, this is a great glass, I'll buy it. Divergent thinking is saying, how is this glass made and can I make one here? just like the mobile phone that's recording this, right? Huawei, China, Samsung, there you go, and obviously iPhone, US. So is there an Indo phone that can be done and made in Indonesia? Not just assembled in Indonesia, but the raw materials sourced from Indonesia, built in Indonesia, and sold from Indonesia out. And you know where he went to was a step further than that, because what happens? Jeroen, grab that chair there, brother. Yeah, sit down. You're good. So where he went to was, he said, right. So what many countries are doing right now is that they're extracting the raw material, selling the raw material at $1. That goes overseas. It gets value added and sold back for $10. Is that a good deal? No. But that's what's happening. So just that's what's been sparked by what you just mentioned, just to clarify. Thank you so much. Now, what about the detractors, right? So there's those people saying, okay, next generation social enterprise, can it work? How can people feed themselves, clothe themselves? Because I agree, you know, I guess the way the system is set up right now is what you're saying is it's going into the pockets of the few, not the many, which I think most people here would agree upon. So then how do we, and I know you're not about burning down the current system to make place for this, I know you're not about that, but how do we then create a situation where there's a transfer that is equitable, that is sustainable, which doesn't have too much of the social negative impacts on the population? What would you say to that?
So I think that the key to keeping the capital where it probably should be is building financially non-extractive companies. Now I need to
explain that one, please.
Yeah, I need to define what this means.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by talking about a decision that I made highly unconventional with my own company, Radically Open Security, roughly 10 years ago. I decided to sell my company for €1 to a foundation. Worst sale ever, right?
Wow.
Now, people would ask, why on earth would you do this? The reason why I did this is because I wanted to ensure that the company would never be sold. The reason why I wanted to ensure that the company would never be sold is because I wanted to protect the purpose and the mission of my company, and I knew that, exits incentivize short-term thinking. Yeah. And what I was attempting to do really was to take the profit motive out of the business with the hypothesis that if you remove the profit motive, the only purpose left that the business has is impact. So I also, the reason why I wanted so badly to make this change is because I have a number of ideological differences with the cybersecurity industry. So some of the market leaders in the Netherlands in cybersecurity, they do things like, there was one particular company that was building surveillance systems, and it sold them to developing countries with authoritarian governments. And when the hacker community in the Netherlands called them on it and said, hey, dear, insert name of company here, could you please stop doing this? Did they stop? No, they just sold that part of the company. So on top of that, it's really typical for cybersecurity companies to hack activists, like Extinction Rebellion, because they're terrifying, right? Also, they work with intelligence agencies. They will conduct cyber warfare, so they will basically find these things called zero-day vulnerabilities, which is basically previously unknown vulnerabilities that you can basically use. They'll sell it to NATO countries, so we can basically wage warfare against other countries. Of course, half the time this probably leaks out and winds up in ransomware that winds up getting the rest of us. But this kind of stuff, from an ethical perspective, a large portion of the hacker community does not agree with. But the problem is that there's such a large portion of the cybersecurity companies doing these kinds of things, and if it's not ethically sketchy. The alternative is oftentimes things that are just commercial, like the big four accountancy firms. They're also into cyber. And really what I thought, we need a social enterprise on the cybersecurity market, because we need to be able to give qualified hackers somewhere else to go, where they can sort of vote with their working hours, for the world they want to live in. But then I asked my friend Michiel Leenaars from the NLNet Foundation, I want to create something different, but I don't know how. And he also came back to me with saying, Melanie, there's something very interesting that you should hear about, and it's from the Dutch church. So sometimes a church wants to conduct commercial activity of some kind, right? And then that money goes with a tax benefit back to the church again. Now, in the Netherlands, the most famous example of this is a language institute that's known as Regina Caeli, otherwise known as the Nuns of Vught. So Vught is a small village in the Netherlands. So basically, the language institute is very high quality. Our Queen Maxima in the Netherlands is originally from Argentina. So she learned her Dutch at this language institute. And then the profits go back to the nuns. That's how it works. So we figured what we would do is, let's make our commercial spin-off a cybersecurity company, and let's make our quote-unquote church the NLNet Foundation. And NLNet is a Dutch, basically a funding agency that has funded open source digital rights projects and basically anything for an open internet for the last 35 years. Wow. Yeah, so NLNet funds things like, and for the techies, you're going to recognize these names, GNU, Tor, Jitsi, DNSSEC, WireGuard, a lot of kind of usual suspects. And they're also involved with the European Commission also for a big funding program called Next Generation Internet, or NGI 0. Anyway, but the point is that the funny thing about this construction, in Dutch it's called a fiscaal fondswervende instelling. In English it's called a fiscal fundraising institution, FFI for short. Now the interesting thing about this FFI is it forces you as an entrepreneur to give 90% of your profits to charity. 90%. Not 5%, not 10%, 90%. So when I heard about this, it gripped me and it didn't let me go. And I realized I have to try this or I'm just going to regret this, for the rest of my life. So, I decided I was going to try it. But of course, when I told people that I was going to start a company that donates 90% of its profits to charity, people thought I was crazy. First of all, they didn't think you could run a business this way, or otherwise they just figured I was full of it. But it turns out that it works. So the 90% is donated. The last 10% is our cash flow buffer that we need to make payroll at the end of every month. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, yes, but this is impossible. What do you do? Do you work for free or not pay your staff? No. Don't get confused. I said we donate 90% of our profits, not 90% of our turnover. So basically what this means is I can basically charge market-conform rates to my customers. And I like to say just because we're not-for-profit doesn't mean we're cheap. And the other thing is I pay market-conform rates to my staff members. So I have ethical hackers, for example, that are earning somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 euros an hour. These are not starvation wages, right? So the point is that everyone's getting paid fairly. We also reinvest what we need into growth and stability of the company. So we also have plenty of corporate overhead. So things like project management, finance, sales and marketing, IT and infrastructure. I'm also kind of, useless managerial overhead, right? So this all needs to be paid. We only talk about profits at that moment after all of this overhead has been paid for, and then that, is basically the money we quote-unquote don't need that would otherwise be dividended out to shareholders.
Got it. So some of you are probably thinking now, academic and entrepreneur, what a deadly combination. So just to make sure that you're all with me, everyone just raise your right hand so I can see that you're with me. All right, okay, that's good. Victoria, thank you. Nice to see your right hand. So question, so we've been through as you mentioned today, we're talking about Post Growth Entrepreneurship. You know, we're here with Dr. Melanie Rieback, one of the 9 most innovative women in the European Union, okay? And we've spoken about, you know, this next generation social enterprise. And you've given us a few ideas about how it can work, the fact that it's not about tearing down the old system, but it's literally about, well, how do we slowly but surely make this transition? And you've given us some really good kind of case study examples. I'm so happy that you're a person as well, which I kind of knew, but you put your money where your mouth is, right? Because a lot of people talk about things, but don't do things. But you talk about things and do things. So there's maybe 2 or 3 more questions I have before audience. If you have some questions in your mind, just think of what they might be. You may have recorded them already, or you might be like a bit in my head, like already like, there's no more room. There's no more room in here, right? You might be there, you might be, let's see. But just think about a couple of questions. So these 2 or 3 questions. So the first one is, let's take, you know, a pessimistic view for a change. As you know, I'm an optimist, you're an optimist, but let's try to emphasize for the sake of this. So if you had a pessimistic view of this whole, you know, ethos, well, it's more than ethos, it's a movement, right? Towards next generation social enterprise, what would your naysayers or doubts be from the view of a pessimist?
I hear 2 main objections. I think the first objection is that is basically, what about human nature? People are selfish. Who's going to want to do this? So this is, I think, one of the first pieces of criticism that I get a lot. A second one is I also ask a lot of questions about investment and whether or not we should be working with external capital like venture capitalists. And a lot of people are like, yes, but don't you actually need external capital in order to grow a business and in order to have an impact? Because otherwise what you do is going to be severely limited. And they sort of don't believe that you can do things like bootstrap or even change the finance industry. And to be quite honest, this is a heavy lift, right? Because a lot of the things that I'm saying right now are, first of all, unknown. And it's also extremely unconventional, and not everybody is going to want to do this, clearly. But, you know, for me, you know, I do remain an optimist in the sense that I think not everybody has to do it. I just think a small number of early adopters need to show the way. Because the nice thing also about entrepreneurship is that 1 or 2 brave individuals can create something, and even those who might not share our ideals will also come along with us. The other thing also is I think that a lot of the naysayers, I think sometimes it's also because of political dogma. And look, I've already used a few triggering words here also, for example, to people on the right, things like degrowth. I mentioned colonialism, so I'm sure a few people already, probably are tuning out. But look, let me now play devil's advocate and also explain that there's a lot of really wonderful things on the other side too. You know, I think also if you consider things like religion, if you consider things like the church, Christianity, for example, there's also a lot of really beautiful ideas and really beautiful principles, even with the populist right. You know, just the concerns about things like foreigners, you know, all the foreigners basically that are coming. I mean, some of this, I think, is kind of populist because it's also like, you know, why do we want all these foreign investors basically coming in, you know, invading our country with all of their money, you know, and basically, you know, why do we keep selling our good local companies, you know, to whoever, you know, the United States or China or Russia or wherever, or Germany, you know. So the point is that, I mean, we want to keep our local things local, right? And in that sense, I think also, you know, if you consider Pope Francis, for example, I mean, it's shocking how much amazing stuff is in the Christian social doctrine, you know? And also with Catholicism, if you consider the encyclicals that have been written by Pope Francis, like, for example, Laudato Si', Pope Francis was basically writing about trickle-down economics and climate change. Similarly, also another encyclical that he wrote, Fratelli Tutti, he was also talking about, again, economics and the COVID crisis. And of course, one can ask the question, well, why is the Pope talking about economics? Well, why wouldn't he be, right? So, and similarly also with Islam. A lot of really basic fundamental concepts like with financial extraction. Financial extraction, oftentimes called usury, is also sinful in almost every major world religion, In Islam, it's called riba. And basically that's why you have things like Islamic banking, and Sharia finance. I'm not going to say that it hasn't been somewhat commercialized, but the actual religious principle, though, is that you should have basically no interest rates, or at least very low interest rates, so the banking is no longer predatory. That's beautiful, And also similarly, also with Christianity, the parable of Jesus and the money changers, and how Jesus got super pissed off at basically using money to breed more money, and he threw them out of the temple district. So look, on the one hand, I think there's things that the political left can resonate with, but I think on the other hand, there's an awful lot that can resonate with the political right as well. And what I really like about all of this, and what I also really like about business, is I think it transcends also these kinds of political, because we can make business without being woke. and we're not tearing things down, we're building. And I think in such a way, we can actually, in a way, almost use capitalism to build bridges. And this is not how we're used to thinking about capitalism, right? But if you think about it, though, capitalism at its essence is just human organization. It's just groups of people getting together to do things in financially self-sustaining ways. That's it. And the whole layer of neoliberal baggage that we've put upon this, with the financialization of our companies, this can be discarded. And it should be, and whether it's because we're trying to make a more fair and equitable world, or whether or not we're doing it because, it's also our ministry. Either way, and this is, I think, also really what I want to convey with this, that, I do think that there might be detractors, but even from a more dogmatic and political perspective, I think that we can, describe this in many different ways, that it also can connect with people on every side. Because I think that also people on the political spectrum on both sides have incredibly good points and also have incredibly good intentions.
One of the things, thank you for that. There's a few things. So one of the things is that, two questions, by the way, then it's over to you. One of the things is we connect on this a great deal. And I noticed that earlier on in that, the motto of Indonesia is unity and diversity. And I shared with you stories from my childhood growing up in children's homes that taught me and showed me in reality that people who hate each other, different ideologies, races, religions, and colors, can actually come together when something threatens all of us. And this happened three or four times growing up in this kid's home, and the introvert within me connected with it, saw it, and converted that into a mission for me in life, which is about how do we find ways to bring people together, to create incredible things for people to grow, to learn, and have powerful positive impacts. So I believe in people. That's what I'm trying to say. And the fact that we're emotional beings first and rational second, leave that one with you. So Simon Sinek, those of you who know him, 3 concentric circles. The outer circle represents your logical mind. The 2 inner, basically, that's your emotional mind, basically. I'm paraphrasing. So what happens is that most of us make decisions from our emotional mind, then rationalize them. What do I mean by that? It's like if I'm going to the gym, right, and I want to lose some weight. So I go and I work hard for a week, right? Working hard. I get to the end of the week and I'm saying, I've worked so hard this week, I deserve that bar of chocolate. So I eat the bar of chocolate. So I've made an emotional decision and then rationalized it. And this is what actually gives me hope with human beings, because I've sat across from people with diametrically opposite viewpoints, but by doing 3 things. And this is John Meacham as well, the book called Soul of America. Check him out. Number one is curiosity. So if I'm sitting across from Melanie now, it's what has happened in Melanie's life to give her the understanding and the viewpoints that she holds now. What were those incidents? Number one, and I listen. Active listening, meaning I'm not listening to interrupt. I'm not pretending to listen. Yeah, sure, I hear you, Melanie. Nope. I'm listening to what she's saying and what she's not saying. So I'm listening with curiosity. Number one, when I understand what those events or experiences might be, then I move to humility. Meaning, if I was in the same shoes as her, had the same upbringing that she did, with the same people around me that she did, the chances are I would respond in exactly the same way, if not further in, either way. So that's humility. And then where you end up with is compassion, an understanding that I've spoken to this person, I may not believe what they believe, but I've suspended my thoughts temporarily. I've asked some questions and listened actively as to why they are who they are and why they respond in the way that they do. And I've nailed it down to a few different experiences. Humility, because now I understand that I am the same as this person, actually. Because if I had the same upbringing and ideas and ideology around that they did, I would be the same. And the third one is compassion. So it gets to the point where I still may not believe what she's saying, but at least I can get to a stage where I say, you know what? She might have a point. When we reach that point, there's possibility. With possibility comes hope. With hope comes something else. So these are the areas that we absolutely agree upon, and I'm really glad that you're here. So as I've said all of that, the next question, remember one more question, is, if you could, because you're a particular kind of a person, okay? So you've done the whole process of, acquiring all the different letters after your name. Okay, you've been through the process of fumbling your way and learning your way through business, not doing the MBA, but learning on your skin to arrive at this viewpoint of next generation social enterprise. So if I were to ask you if there are one or two experiences growing up in your life that you think were fundamental to how you think now and why, what would you say one or two of those experiences could have been?
Well, I think that one experience maybe is just growing up in the United States in suburbia. So I'm originally from Florida, basically South Florida, and people are doing pretty okay. I came from one of those neighborhoods where the students had nicer cars than the teachers. I'm not rich. My parents aren't rich or anything, but definitely middle class, and also teachers aren't paid that well. But it was the kind of thing that everybody had their house, the swimming pool in the back. Life wasn't bad, and we went shopping and we went to our restaurants and life was good. And yet people still weren't happy. And I also realized sort of at that point that, there has to be more than this. Because, yes, we have good lives and yes, we can consume. But, I also grew up there before things got political, which in a way, maybe I'm grateful about that. But, I lived there in the era of, dangling chads. I don't know if you all remember that. But, and a lot of people, even just getting youth out to vote and things like that was sort of hard enough because everybody just had their lives and nobody really cared, about politics or the greater picture. So, and I realized that this, we're all going for this American dream, and yet I felt like I was burying my own dreams in going after the American dream. This is also part of the reason why I left, because of course I'm an expat. I'm living 23 years in the Netherlands now, very long time. So at this point, it's literally half my life. So I'm basically half American and half Dutch at this point. So, I would say that that's probably one of the formative things. The other thing that is probably formative is the fact that I grew up in a household with parents that were extremely technological. So before I lived in Florida, I think when I was about maybe like 3 to 7 years old, my parents, actually lived in Naperville, Illinois, and my parents worked at Bell Labs. And of course, Bell Labs was sort of, the big research tech company back in those days. It was sort of like Google before Google existed, They invented a whole lot of technologies there. And, I can remember from my childhood, just growing up with my, old 8086 computer with the green and black monitor and the, 5 1/4 floppy drive and the 300 baud modem. So most of you won't remember this, but these were the days before the internet. But we did have dial-up modems, and this also led to bulletin board systems, which eventually led to the internet. But it was sort of before all those days. And I can remember learning how to code first with Logo, remember the turtle, and then with GW Basic, and then Turbo Pascal, and then eventually later on I moved over to things like C and C++. But, growing up in a household where my father was a telecommunications hardware manager and my mother was a C programmer, I grew up a bit geeky. And that's great because, also I think just being a technologist, being, also a geek from when I was like this young. Of course, when you're young, it's a bit socially annoying, but it gets better when you get older. But I also think just that sort of rational, of course, emotionally, I'm there too, but in a way, almost being almost a semi-autistic kind of IT person, rationalist. I think this logic and this rationality too has allowed me to sort of take this lens and bring this kind of scientific and techie lens also to business. Because I think the wonderful thing is that I was never indoctrinated. So I could basically come in just trying to understand how the system worked. And I feel like that's an advantage because if people study business, if they get their MBAs, they're basically just learning the dogma and they're just accepting it for what it is. But even just asking the most basic, simple of questions, like asking with business, is growth good? Is growth good? When is it good? How can growth be good? When is growth not good? We don't think about these things at all, right? And, and another thing is just like leading this also to a story. There's a wonderful economist whose name is Kate Raworth. And she's written a book that's called Donut Economics. I don't know if any of you have heard of the book. If not, I would highly recommend the book. Now, she also, if you don't have time for the book, watch her TED Talk. And in her TED Talk, she also tells a story about nature. And in particular, she talks about trees. And she says, well, let's consider this. If you have a tree, at the very beginning of a tree's life, it grows really, really quickly, almost exponentially, right? But then at a certain point, this growth, it starts to flatten out. And at a certain point, this tree stops growing and it starts thriving. Now, if the tree wants to grow further, well, it can't grow further. It's already reached its maximum size. So what does the tree do next? It drops seeds. And then those seeds form new little trees. Now, her question then is, if this is how nature does it, then why is it any different with our businesses? See, there's one thing in nature that grows exponentially forever, and it's cancer. And it's toxic to any system that it's living upon. So why then does it inform how we do business?
I've really enjoyed this one because I'm learning so much. Now, questions. Yes, so we'll get the third mic just over here. Now just give yourself a moment. When you get the microphone, Guzman will mic you up and you'll be on camera for a little bit, but that's okay. So Sari is the first question, who's going to be our guest next week that we're going to talk about in a little bit of time. Just before we get to your question, Sari, so one thing which I heard that I caught from you, Melanie, was about the teacher, which we won't talk about now, but the teacher, and I think that has quite a lot to do with who you became. And the other thing which I was going to ask you that I want to go to the audience is, see, because quite often techie or geeks, as people kind of called them, are in their introvert, right? Yet with you, I sense a bit of introvert when we first met, perhaps, but then when you speak with passion, with soul, like you're convinced about what you're saying. So other people which are maybe introverts who are in that space, how the hell did you do it? But again, we're going to go to this question first, but these are the two questions that popped up. Sari, over to you. Yeah.
Hello.
It's okay, don't leave it. It will take a minute.
Hello, my name is Sari. I'm Balinese. So it's very interesting what you say about different economics. I like the way you say it, like 90% for the profit. There is a Balinese notion called karma economics. I don't know whether that's a notion that you have heard before. Basically, it's not how much money in your bank account, how much impact that actually impacting I call it not the growth, but the investment. The investment to people, how we actually invest in the people, and those going to be back again to the system because, what we give and what we plan, we will actually retrieve. So that's the Balinese notion of karma economics. I don't know whether you heard about that. And also, like you, I'm a nerd. I used to be in computing science, and it's too hard for me. Life for me is 1-0. I think I'm older than you. We used to program in like binary. I think I'm older than you, Robert.
54.
Oh, well, you're much older.
I'll take that as a compliment.
I'm 21 in hex. So I could see like we are in computing, so we see it 1 or 0. So I think if we have those karma economics, or what you call that before, like the 90% thing, and the donuts economic, would not make a better world, because sometimes as a capitalism, they're just looking after their own entity, which is in Bali, we have to look after ourselves, but also our immediate community. Because not like, for example, like in the Western country where there's a social security, we don't have, well, we do have that, but our insurance policy is actually looking after those people around us. That's why the karma notions is very much in Bali and embedded in Bali, is in our DNA. So that's why everything in Bali works, apart from the Indonesia, because we respect the land agreements, because we don't want any karma coming back to us. So I don't know your thought about the karma economics, whether you have heard the notion.
I wasn't familiar with karma economics, but I mean,
that's a new notion from us. Not how much money in the bank account. But,
yes. Well, I'm certainly familiar with things that are analogous. I mean, honestly, just hearing those two words, karma economics, just makes me immediately feel happy. You do have other related concepts like Buddhist economics. And you also have, again, things like post-growth and degrowth, other forms of new economics, ecological economics. I don't really like the terms post-growth and degrowth, to be honest, because I think it's actually putting the emphasis in the wrong place. Because I think that growth isn't per se bad, but I think that it creates a lot of confusion, particularly degrowth, because when people hear degrowth, then they immediately think recession. But that's actually not what it is. What it is basically, like with the concept of post-growth, it's basically asking the question of how can an economy thrive when it's not growing? The related concept of degrowth basically asks the question, how can an economy thrive when it's in decline? And these are not hypothetical questions. I mean, we find ourselves in situations of economic decline all the time. So we need to understand full well how to be able to thrive in such conditions. But another thing also that Kate Rayworth talks about with donut economics is she also asks the question with things like gross domestic product, GDP, right? Why is it that it always has to be up and to the right? The moment that it starts to flatten out, what happens, recession, layoffs, suffering. Why is this the case? And she and other economists also explain that the reason why it's this way is because the economy needs to continue growing because there's so much financial extraction that it must continue growing just to maintain a steady state. So if you then thus want to build an economy that can flatten out and still be okay, what it means, in other words, implementing a post-growth economy, then it means you need to eliminate the financial extraction. Similar also with a degrowth economy. If you want to have an economy that can thrive when in economic decline, you also have to put a halt to the financial extraction. So it's actually, when we say post-growth or degrowth, it's a red herring, because it's actually putting the emphasis in the wrong place. Growth isn't the point. Financial extraction is. And that's really why I prefer thinking about things like financially non-extractive business, and also, yes, financially non-extractive finance. These are also concepts that I think if we really want to turn things around, it's also realigning incentives. It's also really applying systems thinking in an incredibly deep way.
Okay.
And I feel like also, this also comes back to karma too, because if you're not financially extracting, then it sort of comes back to, as Simon Sinek said, start with why. And really also coming back to, also with that why, is also with our own personal purpose. Like, why are we doing this? And that's very individual to each person.
Yeah, about the investment instead of investment. So we de-invest, because investment, sometimes we have to de-invest. And one last question, since you're a computer geek, is life 1-0? Is life binary? Yes. Do you think life is simple as 1-0?
Of course not.
I still believe in life is 1-0, because I think, is that a yes or no, black and white? Okay.
No,
I think
it's a great question.
I think it's as simple as 1-0 when you're dealing with a quantum computer.
Just before we go to the next question, so next week Sari is going to be here. Natalie will be in this chair, and part of it is that Sari is a beautiful Balinese woman, as you can see, but also spent many years overseas. So how does Sari navigate women's empowerment, knowing that it's a Balinese background, but has all of this international, European, and so on experience that also comes into the mix to become a modern Balinese woman? How does that happen? So it'll be a very interesting talk next week. I strongly suggest you come. Detlev, over to you.
Yeah. So first, one small thing, Sari know this. Our former governor of Bali, Mangku Pastika, he just once said that actually only because of tourism and the money coming from outside to Bali, that was actually the thing what kept the Hinduism in Bali. So there's not always bad if money comes from outside. In this case, it was good. So that's one thing. So, but now the question, and this was with this professor from the German,
Swiss German University. Yeah, Dr. Sabao Musa.
He had one worry, and what was a bit hard what he said. That he said that actually the younger generation in Indonesia and maybe all over the world is more or less only interested rather in trading than in producing certain things or innovate things. So all hop on the same train. What is, especially in Indonesia, it's pretty much seen. So what is the tip to move this in the right way?
Clarifying question, what is it that they're trading?
Well, trading is what we have in Indonesia, all these unicorns, Tokopedia, etc., etc. Well, that's fashionable, going
Absolutely.
for trading.
Yeah, okay. Two things. I'm going to address first your comment, and then I'll get to your other question. So you were talking about tourism. I don't think tourism is bad, and certainly having customers that come to the country to spend their money, it certainly can add to the local economy, and many can have a living off of it, and of course most in Bali I think probably do. So I don't mean to imply that tourism is somehow bad. However, again, I was talking about the difference between locally run and locally owned businesses versus multinationals. And that's more sort of the financial extraction angle, like either the value is staying in the country or the value is leaving the country. So, I mean, the tourism is fine, but I'm just more in, also in terms of trading. I mean, certainly, the financialization of assets can create a very large problem. It's like real estate as an asset class rather than as a place for people to live. I don't know if real estate prices have been appreciating as much here as it has been in Europe, for example, in Amsterdam. More. So, look, I mean, there's a couple ways to look at this. I mean, if you're an asset owner, in other words, if you own a house or if you own rental properties or you're using this as an asset class, this kind of asset price inflation is good for you. If you are not an asset owner and you're the kind of person who needs to rent, who can't afford to buy or who chose not to buy, and it's really odd because in a way we look at asset price inflation as being a good thing, but then we look at commodity inflation as being a bad thing. And this sort of comes back to the trading. We financialize things, and of course nowadays it's super hip and chic, to want to trade everything. We're, making our blockchains and tokenizing things, and also with our NFTs, and we can be able to make money off of these things, and sometimes they do appreciate in value. Absolutely. But I think we also need to ask the more fundamental question of, yes, but what are we creating with all of this? If you have a good answer for that, no worries, right? But, I mean, I think, though, rather that looking at everything as asset classes rather than just as goods or services or things that just human needs, really, I think is really a large part of the problem. Because, I mean, I think with, for example, like let's say that you do real estate, right? And let's say that you're helping people to buy things or you're helping to construct things or, I mean, I think you can sort of ask yourself the question, again, as Simon Sinek said, of why? Like, start with why. And are we doing this because, we want financial value to be created, which then can go to ourselves or go to whoever, wherever the capital is coming from, right? But what about the ecosystem, right? Because the problem is that, we're externalizing costs onto everybody else. And here's the thing, I mean, consider things, and another thing in Indonesia that's very popular is cooperatives. I mean, some of the cooperatives are more real co-ops, than others. But at the same time, if you have something like a housing co-op, that basically is just then a group of sort of people, getting together to basically buy the property, share the property, sort of co-own the property, in such a way that basically they're also, those who are living there are the same people as those who are basically putting up the financing, to be able to get this property in the first place. And it's more focused really around meeting that need. And in a way, it's kind of like cutting out the middleman, which can lead to more affordable housing. Now, here's the interesting part. You can actually be a middleman to help start this stuff. And this is what I was talking about earlier with decommoditization. Can you use your skills, I mean, also for things like property development or, financing or whatever it is that you do to help people to start more of these kinds of housing co-ops rather than just helping to create more Airbnbs? Because, I mean, you vote with your feet for the world that you want to create. If you vote to be employed, in such a way that you're creating more Airbnbs, we get the kind of world where we have more Airbnbs. If you vote to create more housing co-ops, then we get the kind of world where we have more co-ops. And look, I'm not saying that co-ops are perfect. Another thing also is that co-ops can also be extractive. Let me be clear. I mean, a group of cooperative owners can also decide, hey, we want to collectively sell our house to private equity. They can decide this. And it happens often enough. In the Netherlands, we have a bank called Rabobank. It started as a farmers cooperative, and now it's just yet another big evil bank. So, they're not perfect. But at the same time, you can apply tools like for financial non-extraction. I hadn't mentioned this yet, and I need to. There's a tool that's called steward ownership that I think is very important. What steward ownership is doing is it is basically realigning incentives by separating profit rights from voting rights. That's kind of the canonical description. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to make sure that anyone who is financially extracting from a business has zero governance control over the company. Thus, to ensure that the financial incentives are not dictating the actual behavior of the company.
That one's very important. Mamma mia. Great question. The answer was definitely expansive. Let's put it like that. So, any more questions? Yes. So we've got 2 over here and 3. Mamma mia! We're going to be here for the next 2 hours. That's fine. No problem. So, Jeroen, Ben, and then the 2 over here. Okay, go.
Good evening. Thank you for your talk. I'm Dutch, but I have never lived there. But that's a difference.
Okay.
I just want to ask you, how do you were talking a bit about social entrepreneurship also, I think, in the beginning. Might have missed that, but how do you incentivize young people to change? Because the change will come from the younger generations, I think, to do more business for good or less extractive things, like what just also Detlef mentioned about maybe just trading, do like easy things, which don't change the system. It's all about money, let's say, and basically do some more businesses for good. How do you change the economy, trying to give back more and doing the wrongs of the economy maybe more right?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think Ben's next. Yeah, go. So yes, please.
So I'm going to start with a maybe somewhat naive yet optimistic statement that I think people are more good than bad generally. And I think that if you give people an option that they can do good without sacrificing too much, then I think probably 9 times out of 10, most people will choose for that. The problem is that oftentimes it's the culture to do the extractive thing. If we consider pop culture, celebrities, internet influencers, a lot of what we're seeing in our role models is people who are flaunting the things that they own, that are, we come to idolize the rich. We find it aspirational. And I think you can't say that's bad. You can't. And I think people have their own individual reasons also for wanting this. And I think those reasons can be super legitimate. But I think, though, what we also need, rather than trying to chide people, don't do it, don't tell anybody that they're doing things wrong, but rather I think what we need to do is we need to be role models so they can see, in other words, that there are other ways to do it as well, right? And we need to, of course, maintain the personal choice. We're not going to be forcing anyone to choose one path or the next. But I think that, in a way, it's a bit like the book Crossing the Chasm, right? Because it sort of starts with the early adopters. It's going to start with those who really agree with you. You're preaching to your own choir members. And those are the crazy ones that are going to go out on a limb to say, sure, I want to give my company away for €1. Right? I mean, because trust me, this is a tough sell. Not everyone's going to do this. But the point, though, is that, at a certain point, you might encounter somebody who has. And as long as we're not lecturing and as long as we're just instead sort of inspiring, it could be that some of these choir members think, hey, that's interesting, and maybe would want to give it a try. So slowly you start getting a very small group of early adopters who are extremely like-minded, who are trying it. Then at a certain point, that circle starts expanding because, of course, 6 degrees of separation, right? So, they have friends, they have associates, it slowly starts spreading. Then you get to the chasm. Now, the chasm, the mainstream is on the other side of the chasm. You are not going to get them with your ideals. They don't care. The main thing is they will only come along when they see it working. And that's the thing. You just need to start growing the coalition of the like-minded organically until it reaches the point that enough others... It was the same thing with radically open security when I first started it. at first, like all of my customers were, basically idealistic techno hippies who happened to be also chief information security officer at their big corporation, and they fought their bureaucracies to get me in the door. But at a certain point, though, once we started picking up steam, ultimately we got to the chasm, and the people on the other side started coming along not because we donate to charity, not because of our ideals, not because we're a not-for-profit steward-owned company, but they came along because we give good pen tests, and pen tests are security audits, by the way. And this can be testified by the fact, people ask, well, if you're a not-for-profit company, who's going to trust you? If you don't have profit motive. It turns out a lot of companies trust us. Our customer list, Radically Open Security now is a 50-person company. We're 10 years old. We've had hundreds of customers, including Google, the European Commission, the Dutch energy grid, banks, insurance companies, telcos, hosting providers, core internet. When I say core internet, I mean things like Amsterdam Internet Exchange and RIPE NCC, right? We security audited COVID apps for the European Commission, for multiple nation states, for Netherlands, for Poland, for Italy. We audited the Google Apple Exposure Notification API. Google and Apple didn't necessarily want to cooperate, but okay. We also audited the DCC, which was the European standard for the QR codes, on those COVID apps back then. These are really high-profile jobs, and yet they gave it to Radically Open Security, which testifies to the quality of the cybersecurity services that we're giving. You don't get customers like Google for no reason. So the point is that the skeptics might tell you, yeah, not-for-profit company, cute. But the moment that I can tell you these kinds of things, you can't argue with facts. This is not just a theory. I have books that you can open and examine to actually see how the finances work. And at the end of the day, that is the only way that you're going to convince anybody. Just be the change, make an incredible success story out of it, and people will come with you because it's freaking awesome.
There's two things that come up. I really want to know how this nerdy person became so, I love it, but another, privately. So Ben is the next question. So we've got about 2 more questions left, right? Michael, yep, good. About 2 questions left. Ben, I'm going to try to get you to keep it short, but Lord only knows if you will. Over to you, my brother. Sure. 1 second.
Hi, so my name is Benjamin. I'm running a research and education project to address the deeper roots of unsustainability. And among those deeper roots is what you mentioned before, is those limiting beliefs about human nature. We are naturally greedy, it's our unchangeable nature to be selfish and nothing you can do about it. And that stands on the way of the change we need, because how can we move to another economic model if what we are is deeply selfish? Then the current extractive model is the only logical outcome. How do you address this limiting belief? That's my first question, and sorry if you mind me adding another. Do you have a vision to move from post-growth entrepreneurship to actually post-growth economic? Because I think ultimately what you are pioneering today must become the norm tomorrow if we want a chance to integrate our social and ecological limits and to have a future that's both sustainable and desirable. So yeah, that's my 2 questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice questions. I think the first one about the selfishness of people. I think that the economist Muhammad Yunus, of course, Nobel Prize winning economist who invented microfinance and started the Grameen Bank, he said it best when he said that people are both selfish and selfless. And I think you need to accommodate for both. People have needs, right? People need to put food on the table. People need to have a roof over their head. People want to put their kids to school. People need adequate health care. People occasionally need entertainment. They might want to, travel somewhere. They might want to go eat a fancy dinner in a restaurant or go to the film or, these kinds of things. And that is all perfectly okay. So I think that you need to come up with a model that can allow for all of this, while at the same time also allowing people to contribute to something higher. Because with radically open security, I work with 50 people, and not all of the hackers on my team are as idealistic as I am. In fact, I'll tell you that quite a few of them are not. I get quite a few, have quite a few rate conversations with people, and some of them can't manage their money too well. And, we've got all kinds, right? And also, different just political opinions. I mean, we've got diversity also on the team. And the point is that they don't need to agree with me. They don't need to be the same as me. They just need to know how to hack computer systems. That's it, right? And the point is that, they get paid market-conform rates for providing their service, which is hacking stuff. For the rest, whether they agree with me, whether they disagree with me, whether they would give away their own company for €1, I've got folks on my team who've sold their companies. And the thing is, they don't have to agree with me because I am providing employment. I'm creating jobs, which basically means that those 50 people, basically just because of my purpose and my mission and the way that I set things up, they can come along with me for the ride. And they don't have to sacrifice anything because they're basically still getting their normal rates for performing penetration testing. And for them, it's the icing on the cake that we're donating our profits to charity. It's the icing on the cake that we do things like provide not-for-profit cost-price services, for nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society organizations. I hadn't mentioned that one yet. But for them, the cake is that they're getting paid. If I weren't paying the market conform, they wouldn't be here. They would have left a long time ago. So the great part is, with the selfish and the selfless, I provide a vehicle with which they can express both. And because in that sense, that's why it works.
Love it. And there was part 2 about the post-economic.
Yeah, and I think hopefully a shorter answer about the building the post-growth economy is an economy is a meta concept, which consists of things like business.
No, I can put it close. Yeah.
Yeah. So an economy is a meta concept, which consists of things like consumers, businesses, governments, universities. We collectively form the economy. So if you want to implement the post-growth economy, then you sure need to figure out how to implement a post-growth business. And that, I think, is also another sort of sub-definition of post-growth entrepreneurship. We're basically implementing the post-growth economy one startup at a time.
Great question, brother, and thanks for keeping it short, because I know you, brother. It could have gone, the preamble could have gone on for years. You're great. Thank you very much. So 2 more questions. So, yeah, over to you then, Michael, yeah.
Hi, Melanie, I'm Penn. So I've recently read Elon Musk's new biography, which is great. There's countless moments in the book where he pushes his team to the absolute maximum. He's ruthless, really harsh targets. And by doing that, he's managed to achieve incredible scale and growth. And I believe, this is arguable, but I believe his businesses are set out to do good, to protect humanity and perpetuate humanity. So I guess my question is, does the end justify the means? Can you justify unethical behavior if it ultimately contributes towards a more ethical vision? Were there times in your journey where you had to compromise your integrity, cross the line a little, for the betterment of the business?
Yes. Look, I think that Elon Musk is a genius. And I think that he's also, I heard him once called the Michael Jordan of finance, and I believe it. The amount of capital that he's managed to mobilize, I think, for the creation of his companies, between Tesla, Solar City, Boring Company, SpaceX, it's of course nothing short of amazing what he's been able to accomplish. And certainly he's done more, I would say, for solar cars than, not solar cars, pardon me, electric cars than, of course, any other person on the planet. I think that's undeniable. That being said, I think that there's also certain sets of things that he could have done better. I mean, look, how you treat your employees. I'm going to try and have some empathy with him here. He is autistic. And I think that it can be difficult sometimes dealing with human beings. I think that money probably influenced his personality later on, but it could be that some people have difficulties. I mean, it was the same thing with Steve Jobs, right? I don't think that you should intentionally treat your staff fairly, but I also think, like, also even just as an entrepreneur myself, I mean, occasionally even I wake up on the wrong side of the bed and I'm a jerk to somebody when I actually shouldn't have been. I mean, my opinion as sort of a semi-autistic IT geek is that technology is easy, people are hard. And it could just be that some people don't have the human skills, even if they would want to be able to treat people as they deserve to be treated. So I'll say this in his defense. I think the part that I have a greater problem with is the amount that Elon Musk has financially extracted out of his businesses. Because yes, he has done a whole lot for space travel, for for electric cars, for other things. But I also feel like at the same time, look, first of all, he was, I think, the largest recipient of climate subsidies on the planet. So basically, yes, he managed to get a whole lot of capital. Yes, he built a lot of great things. Remember, it was his team that built a lot of it. Yes, he steered them. Yes, it was his vision. But I think also his engineering team was pretty good. Now, the problem is that you take something that's fundamentally a social enterprise, because, of course, Tesla most certainly started as a social enterprise, undeniably. But at a certain point, it all became so financialized, and basically so much value has been extracted. I don't know if you are familiar with the recent AGM, and they basically had a proxy vote on basically Elon Musk's pay package. Because basically he had gotten a pay package. It was disputed, I believe, by a pension fund, because basically he paid himself considerably more than the total combined revenue of Tesla ever. And the thing is, yes, he did a lot, but imagine how much more he could have done if, instead of extracting so much wealth out of Tesla that he became the world's richest man, what if he actually pumped all that cash back into Tesla? Imagine how much better things could have been. Yes, we've got awesome things like the Tesla Model S, and they're beautiful cars. They're incredibly sexy cars. At the same time, maybe with some more capital investment, maybe by now they could have been affordable. And also, I mean, the divisive behavior isn't helping. I know that large, portions of the progressive left now are also boycotting his cars, also because they disagree with some of his political views. I don't want to go into this. But the point, though, is that, I think with maybe a bit more focus and a bit less financial extraction, yes, he did a great job, but I think it could be that maybe he would have been even further along now. So in other words, I think adding financial extraction to things that are already great can still make them better. So...
come up to the last question. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us. I know we're probably not over time because we don't have a time. We just go as long as we need to go. But I just want to thank you for the fullness and the richness of your answers, because it takes a lot of energy to explain all the things that you are, but we're all the benefit of it, because we understand more of a holistic viewpoint as opposed to just extrapolating that part of the question. Thank you. Michael, last question, brother.
Hello, Melanie. So first of all, thanks a lot for coming here. Super cool talk. I will bring home a lot of things here. And I think one of the smartest moves you did was selling the company for $1, preventing you to sell it off.
Yes.
What I want to ask you is, talking about the new generation upcoming, and I know that you did sell the company for $1 because you have the hacking mindset in background. You know how to hack yourself, and you know how to hack systems. In Indonesia, we've got a great young and tech-savvy demographic. Very, very powerful. The next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in Indonesia are fantastic. How can we implement and encourage people to come to that playful hacking mindset to enable them and companies and team to get better?
So, first I want to address what you said about the €1, and then I'll get to how do we encourage people. About the €1. So basically, I think that I had to do it this way in giving the company away at the very beginning, because ultimately I think the company needed to be protected from me. I am the only CEO of a Dutch cybersecurity company of this age and size that has not sold the company. And all of my colleague CEOs have gotten from tens to millions of euros for their companies. I know exactly what I've sacrificed. Now, the way that I see it is it's like the Odyssey. And if you remember the story about Ulysses and how he wanted to sail through the strait with the sirens. And he had said to them, of course, he wanted to be tied to the mast. And of course, his crew members who were rowing, they all needed to put cotton in their ears so they wouldn't hear the sirens. And he basically said, no matter what I say, don't untie me. Now, in a way, this implementing steward ownership, whether it's by, giving your company away to a foundation, you can also add these things called golden shares, which are like veto votes that can also help to prevent a foundation-owned company from either getting sold or changing their purpose and statute and their mission and their purpose and statute. Sorry, it's a long day. Changing their mission and purpose from their statutes. But the other thing is, you also need this to lock your company down, because OpenAI is a good example of a foundation-owned company where things went wrong. There was no golden share, and that's the reason why Sam Altman was then able to sell equity to the company for, $200 billion to Microsoft. So that's also a crucial, essential part of steward ownership. Also, just asset locks. The word sounds boring, asset lock, but actually that is the key, to locking the value of the company inside the company, and that is what matters, in creating these financially non-extractive businesses. So we need to also make it easy. There's actually some initiatives right now in Germany and also in the Netherlands to create steward ownership entity forms. In Germany, the Purpose Foundation actually already got it into the coalition accord of Olaf Scholz. And also in the Netherlands, we actually just recently managed to get it through our Dutch Parliament, the second chamber, our Senate. In a positive vote also, and I want to add, this was also a bipartisan vote. It actually got through because of a majority with both the progressives and the Christian parties and the farmers. Yep. So basically, just we're busy drafting right now the legal text with the idea that if people want to create a steward-owned company, right now it's a bit complicated and expensive to do, but it should be just as easy, as simple as going into the Chamber of Commerce, and then you get the list of things that you can create, like limited liability company, foundation, cooperative, steward-owned company, and just sort of adding it so we can basically let the government add the legal belts and braces basically to lock things down. And I think the final question of how do we instill the hacker mindset is really just to make it fun and also just to encourage people to get curious. And I think curiosity is, I'm very intentional in saying, follow your curiosity instead of following your passion, because people don't know what their passion is. And also that's very demotivating if people don't know what their passion is. But if instead you just ask people, to just think about what you're curious about. I'll leave you with one final story. And this actually comes from...
A little bit closer to your mouth.
Sorry. And this story comes from the author Elizabeth Gilbert, also from Eat, Pray, Love fame, who's very relevant to Bali. And she also wrote another book that was called Big Magic. And in her book, Big Magic, she tells the following story. So one day, she was at home, and there was a little plot of land behind her house, and she got curious about gardening. So she decided to get some plants and plant them and try to get them to grow. Now, after a while of growing these plants, she started getting curious about the history of these plants. So she started doing a little bit of research on the plants and discovered that they came from several regions in the world, like Turkey and the Netherlands and some other places. And at that point, she also, discovered with more research that actually with the history of these plants, it was 18th century botanists who were busy with this, and with some more research, she realized that it was female botanists that had gender issues at that time. So she went and visited a number of these places. The whole process took about 2 years, and then that led to her book that was called The Signature of All Things, which was basically a book about an 18th century female botanist who was working on these kinds of plants. Now, what she's expressing here is that creativity is a scavenger hunt. And you can extrapolate this and take this further to understand that the same thing applies to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is also a creative scavenger hunt, but we don't usually think of it this way. See, we get depressed if we don't know what kind of business we want to start, and we'll just wait around thinking, well, I'll wait for inspiration to strike me. As if we're waiting for a burning bush to descend and say, thou shalt start this company, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. But rather, if you just think about what it is that you're curious about, then that will lead you to the first step that you need to take. You still don't know where you're going, but it's like walking through a foggy forest. There's fog, it's thick, and you can really only see 2 steps in front of you. So you don't know what's further down the road, but as you take the next step, now it opens up to be able to see the next 2 steps in front of you. And then as you walk, then gradually the next 1 or 2 steps keeps opening, and eventually you get there. And, this is part of the reason why, it's no longer, we no longer write 20-page business plans most of the time. It's because if we try predicting in advance what it is that we're going to do, we have no idea, and we're probably going to be wrong. Probably reality is going to slap us upside the head and say, things are actually going to go completely differently than you thought. That's the reason why we've moved over to things like business model canvases. Because it's just one A4, and if it turns out that if we guessed wrong, no worries, just scratch out a few things. It's just an A4, and there's not much sunk cost, so we can easily change it, right? And this also plays into the idea of things like Lean Startup by Eric Ries, the whole idea of building minimum viable products, collect validated learning by trying to sell something, pivot to follow the pain in the market, and then rapidly iterate. We have discovered that taking small steps and iterating, that actually allows us to build incredibly beautiful, and successful and sometimes large things. Same thing with software, right? I mean, agile, right? I mean, daily stand-ups, 2-week sprints, Kanban boards with swim lanes. No, wait. We are even further now. We've got DevOps, right? 1,000 deploys a day, continuous integration, continuous deployment, constant unit testing to make sure that it's working at all time. You can't iterate faster than that. But coming back to that, it's the scavenger hunt. It's the clue. It's the steps. It's listening to your intuition at the same time that you're using this logic. And this makes it fun. This makes entrepreneurship a creative journey. And when you approach entrepreneurship in this spirit, how can you not enjoy it? And this is why people would do it. This is how you encourage people to do it. Because at a certain point, they are being so true to themselves and having such a fascinating, wonderful learning journey and personal journey in doing this. People at a certain point barely need encouragement anymore.
Wow. Well, I have many things to say, which I'm not going to say because we're going to close the show. But in about 2 minutes' time, your last time is just to let people know how to get in touch. Okay, that will be your question, right? So firstly, I want to say thanks to everybody for coming out. It's been a long session, but a superb session, and there's so many things on here that I'm going to be looking forward to digging back into when I look at this. So just keep in mind that this is, I think there's 254 episodes in our YouTube library, even though this is episode 429. The first ones we weren't so consistent with the filming of them, but they did happen, right? Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing, just want to thank Guzman, who's like, his glasses, he's moving his glasses, he's like, I'm tired. Guzman, thank you very much. Sister Ayu, thank you very much, Brother Hadis. So round of applause for the Tropical Nomad team, please, everybody. Woo! Right. And, finally, thanks to you. So 48 hours, you flew in for this. I am so utterly appreciative of you making that move and stepping in and being part of this and being a good sport, knowing that this is a flow conversation. We had a few questions here, but that was it. We met 20 minutes before we started for about 15 minutes. That was it. And to run with this and have the trust and the faith that we would do the right thing, I really appreciate. I really do take that to heart. So thank you very much indeed. And what's the last thing I want to say? Yes, next week, as we know, we have Ibu Sari over here, and I've explained what that will be before. It's a really powerful tale of a modern Balinese woman who was obviously born in Bali, but spent a lot of time overseas, and how she's finding her way to basically be the person that she is, which is a light for herself and others at the same time, within a culture that doesn't necessarily support it from a foundational perspective. I think I'm fair in saying that. So finally, I think that's going to be about it. So thank you, and just let us know if people want to get in touch with you, Nonprofit Ventures, how can they do that?
Great. So there's a couple ways to get in touch with me. The first is just being aware that I run an incubator. So we've incubated roughly 60 startups so far based upon these principles. Our call for applications is open at the moment. And we basically teach based on the principles basically of nonprofit entity forms, steward ownership, and cross-subsidizing charity with one's profits, and all with a post-growth lens. So if you're interested, you can basically go to our website, nonprofit.ventures, and basically that will lead you to the Google form that you can basically fill in if you're interested in participating in the incubator. The second thing also that I'll mention is that I also teach a class called Post Growth Entrepreneurship at the University of Amsterdam Business School. And, I've taught it basically for the second year now to 120 third-year bachelor students. It's part of the Economics and Sustainability minor, and it's worth 6 European credit points. So that's pretty cool. We video recorded all of the lectures, and we basically put it online on YouTube for free with a Creative Commons license. So if you enjoyed this talk and you would like to get the longer 11-hour version of the class materials...
Not by much longer.
Basically, they're available for free on the Nonprofit Ventures YouTube channel. If you want to find it, you can either go to the Nonprofit Ventures website, go to the top bar, click on PGE class, and then that will take you to the link to the YouTube playlist. Or otherwise, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's actually pinned, the videos are pinned to the top of my LinkedIn profile, but additionally, if you just want to shoot me a message, I can also send you a link to it.
Beautiful. Dr. Melanie Rieback, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I think we all know why. One of the 9 most innovative women in the European Council, if not the world. Round of applause, everybody, for Melanie Rieback. Dr. Melanie Rieback.